CPD Live. I'm Jan Henderson, and it's my pleasure to be facilitating this discussion, which focuses on parcel management systems and their potential environmental benefits. Before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, In Design Media acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Now to the session, entitled Greening Parcel Deliveries for the Built Environment. This session considers the rise of e-commerce and associated increase in courier deliveries. Highlighting the negative consequences of this change, it will then detail possible solutions and outline alternatives to the traditional face-to-face delivery paradigm. At the end of this session, you should be able to identify the negative consequences for the built environment associated with the rise in e-commerce, outline the alternatives alleviating these impacts, and identify the smart solutions. Detail the typical component parts, that's software, hardware, user interface of smart delivery management systems and how they interact to deliver parcels, etc., securely and efficiently. Identify the financial, social, and environmental benefits of specifying such systems. And lastly, apply your critical evaluation to choose an appropriate smart delivery solution for a given project. Today's session starts with a 40-minute discussion followed by 20 minutes of Q&A. And if you'd like to ask our panel or a particular person a question, please send a text through the Q&A field at the bottom of your screen. We have 3 speakers on our panel and I'll be moderating. So firstly to Lauren Melton, co-founder and director, Groundfloor, Dale O'Brien, partner at Gray Paxson, and Liam Timms, fund manager, International Towers in Sydney. Firstly, to you, Lauren, could you tell us a little bit about Groundfloor? What does your business do and who are your clients? I mean, considering today's topic is greening parcel deliveries for the built environment today, maybe you can talk us through some of your recent projects.
Fantastic. So thanks, Jan. And hello, everyone. Good morning. Groundfloor is an Australian prop tech company. We're based in Melbourne. Our solution for greening parcel deliveries is a private network of smart delivery lockers in commercial offices and multifamily residential buildings throughout Australia. We also have quite a number of clients in the student accommodation and university space. And our solution, and you see a beautiful image in front of you, is what I call software wrapped with steel. And it's easy to see that the fact that there's a locker, but what's less easy to see is the secret sauce behind the solution, which is a network software that runs in the cloud. The technology enables couriers from any delivery company to make a delivery in about 15 seconds. And once they've done that, the occupant receives an SMS message immediately saying you have a safe, secure parcel for pickup 24/7. And so it's effectively a technology-enabled handover between a courier and a customer that eliminates failed deliveries. Missed you cards, queues in post offices. It reduces courier travel through buildings, which is important, and we'll talk about that and the impact on sustainability. Reduces urban congestion and really just eliminates that life friction of connecting people to their parcels. Some of the clients we have throughout Australia, we are in 6 capital cities. And I guess with Dale and Liam on the call, I should talk about things that are relevant to them. So one of my favorite installations is Melbourne Quarter East Tower in Melbourne. They're getting upwards of 65 packages a day through the system, and couriers make direct deliveries, and people coming, going around out and about through the day and upstairs, they're not interrupted by couriers. All they get is a happy SMS. When they're ready, they go down to the mailroom and collect their parcel. As soon as they've done that, it's freed up for the next customer. So you have parcels cycling through lockers. That one's just working absolutely beautifully. And as that building has grown, they've started to think about adding, additional lockers. In Dale's building, and again, this is coincidence, I didn't know who else would be on the panel. Their building is what I call the Holy Grail. 600 Burke Place is an AMP building where they've just revealed the most divine, gorgeous lobby. And as part of that, they've moved the mail and parcel center from underground in a dark space to being a feature in the lobby in a beautiful, clear glass room with with plants and beautiful tables. So actually picking up a parcel or picking up your mail is a part of the experience of being an occupant of that building. They've also placed it beautifully in an area where it's easy for couriers to access from Little Burke Street. And look, couriers only go upstairs now where there's an exception, something too heavy or too big. So those are two of my favorites.
That's great. Thanks, Lauren. That gives us an overview, and I know we've got lots to talk about. Let's go to the first question. The explosion in e-commerce and parcel deliveries has been a plus in terms of convenience, but has it had negative consequences? But maybe you can just take us through a few ideas to begin with, Lauren, and then we can move on to Dale and Liam for their perspective.
Sure. So, so e-commerce basically evolved at a faster rate than was ever anticipated. And so when you think about the infrastructure to support that, warehouses, turning out goods, that's where it all started. Let's build a website, let's push things out to people, through the delivery system. And as an example of that, most of what has evolved is one item into one box going into one truck trying to reach you. And that's often happening very far away from urban centers. So when you look at the old model of people going somewhere and buying a bunch of things to last for the week and taking them home in one go, you now have a bunch of individual items that are being delivered one at a time, 1 billion times a year in Australia. Consumer behavior has changed dramatically around this, and a part of that is what the retailers conditioned us to do, which is expect free shipping. Well, free shipping, then every time I look at a website, I'm going to buy something. And it makes the problem even worse. We have this instant gratification society that's largely been driven by e-commerce and the ease of things coming to you instead of you going out to them. And also easy no-cost returns have really driven the problem to be significant. And this has evolved over the last 20 years. And only in the last few years have we started to tackle some of these things. And I guess from a sustainability standpoint, there are two pieces of this. One is the sort of last mile, which is things like getting the parcel from the warehouse to the front door. That's low emission vehicles. We're looking at how we're packing vans better. We're doing all of those types of things. But the part that we really are focusing on today, and this is where the built environment and specifiers come into this, is what do you do when the courier rocks up at the building, and how do you connect that person to the customer with the parcel? And so that's really the focus of what we're tackling today. And we've all seen this in our own buildings.
Thanks so much, Lauren. I just wanted to move on to Liam and your practical experience, being involved with a very large commercial building and having the impact of lots of things happening at the same time. What's your perspective on this?
My perspective is we've seen a significant change in the behaviour in the market. If you think, a lot of, if I leapfrog back, 10 years, there are lots of couriers delivering things like legal documents. Well, that's all done digitally now. So in fact, what it's about is a customer experience, which is about the individual. A lot of our work is focused on how do we remove, pain points for individuals during the day. And very much as we live in this world of, I suppose an on-demand world where we can service ourselves at all times. So sometimes that means we're servicing ourselves at home or we're servicing ourselves in the workplace. The more points of friction we can remove for people and make life a lot easier. And it may be and I say to people, there was always a challenge like, you might have to rush out of the office to get somewhere, get to the post office to pick up a parcel or get to somewhere to pick an item up before the shop closed. Whereas now, you have the ability that even if you're traveling for business, you can actually have those deliveries, situated for you in the building. I think also the very big change that, that Lauren was tipping to is that last mile logistics. You're seeing the leading players, establishing themselves in the last mile. And what we're seeing is that in the last mile, we're seeing the explosion of electric bikes. I mean, and in one sense, one of the positives that's come out of the pandemic has been the upscaling of everybody into the use of digital tools to procure shopping and everything. Like virtually, you can some of those, and I've had 2 weeks of isolation myself, so once you've actually been contained to your own home, you really do understand the necessity of how digital is a critical player. And I think the movement of the industry to electric vehicles and certainly electric bikes gives you a really great on-time delivery service in terms of your need can be met very immediately, but also it's electric, so we're taking a lot of vehicles off the road, which is great to see.
That's terrific. So Dale, from a design point of view, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, Dan, look, when you reflect on, I guess, it's a two-pronged problem. So an environmental impact, obviously, yes, it's great to see, as Elaine points out, I guess the influx of e-bikes, but obviously the congestion and road congestion that obviously occurs with a huge influx of courier and deliveries, back to Lauren's point on, single box sort of products, and all that kind of movement of goods. I suppose from a design perspective, though, when we talk about the actual building itself, one of the things that we start to be, I guess, aware of is that we're now moving, so the loading docks in new builds are looking very different. The incoming goods, the continuous flow of goods is a bit of a different impact. And then I guess the ground floor positioning of some of these services and offer for tenants takes up some prime real estate in some instances. So there's the negative in terms of, I guess, decluttering or decongesting the roads, I think is a really important thing to consider, and how we can actually streamline that. How we can get the serviceability and design of these goods coming into buildings working more efficiently and not taking up as much real estate. So there's some clever thinking that needs to come into line there, especially with new buildings, harder in existing assets. And then obviously giving up prime real estate for these tenant services. But that's something that we've been seeing a push for and been pushing for with our clients for quite a lot in recent years. So it's sort of a bit of a multi-prong, negative elements to it, but they all come with positive outcomes ultimately.
We're talking about those positive outcomes.
Yes.
What are the solutions then? So we've started with you. You're talking about design. What are the design solutions that you can see, Dale? And then we can go to Lauren to talk about more technical issues.
Sure. Look, I guess having a single point of sort of goods consolidation of space is an obvious design outcome. Lauren touched on earlier the movement of couriers through building systems and trying to get them up to on floors or into mail rooms and the like. That's obviously going to streamline movement. Vertical transport is alleviated a lot with that as well. Goods lifts can be dedicated to other services. So you're kind of starting to gain back space in other areas. From a design perspective, we've been seeing a big push as a part of the whole, I guess, lessor offer and tenant offer about having, again, front of house access and spaces that aren't treated necessarily in basements and dark, dingy corridors or leftover space anymore. They're becoming dedicated areas. So the design considerations from our perspective is getting that on the ground early, getting a commitment to this idea early. And again, a lot of the work that we do in repositioning assets too, it's taking over space that actually was originally intended as potentially NLA. So there's a bit of a conversation there around recognizing the tenant offer and the value that brings to landlords as well. So from a design perspective, spatially for us, it's really then about getting smart and aligning with companies like Groundfloor, where they'll actually work out what's the right size and quantum to suit the volume and of the building. So that's, I guess, it's a bit of it's multifaceted.
It is multifaceted, but I mean, if you look at it, basically, it's not just coming to the ground floor and being incorporated into a design. It's actually being a feature now, isn't it, from what Lauren was saying? Lauren, would you like to take that up?
Sure. Look, it is a design feature in many of the buildings. In other cases, they're just putting it in a less used space. But I think something that's really important here is the fact that the customer is being asked, or the building occupant is being asked, to come downstairs when they're getting a coffee or visiting a friend to pick up their item. So they're actually becoming part of that handshake, and in doing that, rather than have the courier travel up to them through your lifts, they're coming down. And so the reason why technology it is so nice in this case is because you're employing technology to make that notification. You've got something downstairs. And look, it's probably a point for Liam is, how do you building occupants feel about being asked to do that? So your mail bundle used to be placed on your desk, but now actually you're going downstairs to get it. So it's making every stakeholder part of the solution. The courier delivers, into a locker or to a point on the, on the main floor, and then the building occupants become a part of doing those last few steps for sustainability.
Okay, so Liam, that's the perfect entree for you. Tell us your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's part of an experience for people. We're designing workspaces where we're creating agile environment, where we're creating the environment to get people up and moving around, so they're crossing over and they're meeting people and they're having these serendipitous conversations. So I actually see this as as an extension of that. And to be honest, there's nothing quite like the excitement, dare I say, when a message arrives and something's arrived. It might, it's generally something you bought online. So, there's no doubt, there's a small, human element of satisfaction in that, and the excitement of going down and finding out what had arrived. So I think it actually plays into a complete experience. Plus, the amount of people who are on their feet walking down to get the coffees and go and have a chat downstairs, it's very, all our analysis, is continually just how much time people don't spend sitting at a singular sort of ergonomic work point. They're there for, part of the time, but a significant amount of the time they're actually on their feet, moving around, talking to people, and nothing like going for a walk, and also then that excitement, so I actually see it as a great add to their sort of daily experience. I mean, I know, I can tell you, I was in a meeting the other day that was fairly boring, so I bought my children a couple of board shorts, nothing like buying, sun hats in winter. But I was sitting there and I sat there at the meeting and I ordered board shorts, but now I knew what I bought, but when they arrived and you get the little message saying, hey, this has arrived, come and grab it. You go, oh, that's cool. There is a little, there is an excitement associated with that. That's human nature. So I think it actually adds to the experience, and people are very agile and they're moving around all the time.
Okay, so that sort of comes on to our next question, which is what benefits do asset owners and operators see when smart delivery systems are implemented in their buildings? So you've touched on that, Liam. What have you got to say about that, Lauren?
So yes, Liam's stolen the thunder about amenity. So many of our customers are seeing this as an amenity for their occupants, which is fantastic. And it does add to the excitement. And as we look at our surveys, the younger the individual, the more excited they are by collecting out of a locker instead of fronting up to a human to collect. So I think that's interesting that these experiences, amenity experiences, to the extent they're delivered by technology, is actually a real benefit. The second thing I'll say is the other two main benefits are really tied together, sort of the operational efficiency in the building and the sustainability. A couple of examples there. So where you have parking bays around the building where the couriers have to park outside, and you see this in a lot of existing buildings, it's about creating that throughput. So one of the things we did at our very first commercial building a couple of years ago, 570 Burke Street, we took some data before we put the system in. And to make a single delivery to 570 Burke, which is right next door to you, Dale, it was taking 8 to 9 minutes. And where a courier's in a parking bay for 8 to 9 minutes is very different than if they could rock up now, open up their app, have the door to the locker open, and be back in their truck in 1 minute. And what that means is then 8 more trucks can park in that same loading bay in the same time we formerly were getting 1 delivery. And when you extend that out through the urban part of Melbourne, where we've got 10 to 12,000 delivery trucks a day, most of them are circling around because they can't find parking, and that's actually gotten a lot worse over time as the city has taken out parking. So it's really about that efficiency that's created by having a place to deliver, whether that's a locker or whether it's something else. A single delivery point at the ground floor level is essential to solving this problem. It reduces variability. So like a mailbox, right? The mail guy always has a mailbox where he goes, but he doesn't have anywhere to deposit parcels. And so a parcel solution is really essential, and it needs to be in a nice location near his parking or his or her parking. And that's really, where it all starts. The benefits of not going up and down lifts and so on, those are really secondary to making a really efficient handoff.
Thanks, Lauren. Dale, do you see that there are other benefits as well? Do you have anything more to add to that?
Absolutely. Look, with some of the, I guess, our workspace clients and big corporate clients, one of the very interesting, quite topical now in the return to work environment that we find ourselves in, and I guess creating, turning our cities into magnets again, and actually, a return to work strategy. One of those things we've actually had observational and some of the studies going around and proving that people will actually choosing to come into the office at different times to get those pickups, to get those things which Liam touched on earlier. They might stay home that morning because they're expecting a courier delivery. If you take the friction out of that experience and actually make it easier and sort of create another, just add to the one of the facets of the, I guess, that return to work and the benefit that can give people, will make things a little more streamlined, a little more frictionless in their experience. And that's actually a really great downstream effect for the end user. But I think what that also does is it just adds to the element of, again, the tenant offer that landlords have as part of their whole user experience. And I think that's where that streamlined benefit comes in. I think talking to Lauren's point before too about that, I think it is very quite a complex ecosystem when you look at movement of vehicles, times, delays, transport, the strain it puts on the buildings and the streets, and I guess parking bays and the like. And especially back to the point of, I guess, sustainability here in terms of how we can streamline that process. I think there is a partnership with the courier companies and deliveries, and they could get smarter about the way they deliver the goods and actually how they could streamline that before it even gets to the building. So, I think we've got a part to play, but I think it's a bigger picture there too.
Well, talking about the big picture, our next question, are parcel management systems just simply lockers or something more sophisticated? Can we define what this is? Because we've been talking about it, but we need to define it, I think, Lauren.
Great. No, it's an excellent question. It's something that's really essential when working with architects and specifiers, particularly, is that it is a technology product. It's software. In fact, I'll go a bit further and say in our business, we try not to use the L word, which is lockers, because really that's the secondary part of what we do. We do get in trouble there because we have Lauren and Lynn as the founders of the business. So it's a bit tricky, but it is easy to look at the steel and think of that as an end of trip locker or as a library locker, but it's really the internet software, the software running in the cloud that creates the benefit. So that's what notifies the customer that they have a delivery. That's what allows any courier from any company, even a dry cleaner or someone bringing flowers or food, to rock up to a locker and make a delivery on the first go. And so without that, you don't have that ability to take deliveries from all couriers. So that's really critical. It gives the notifications. It also keeps a complete history of every parcel that's delivered, who delivered it, what time, when it was picked up, what the tracking number is. So it creates that repository of information. So you have end-to-end traceability. And that is what's critical to the courier companies and their support for this type of technology. Is we can always tell them, hey, you dropped it off at 600 Burke. It was Joe the postie, and here's when the customer picked it up. So that's continuum of information is only possible with a software solution. And then lastly, I think this is really important to anyone working in these large assets, is space optimization, right? For if you have 500 people living in a building, you don't need 500 lockers. You probably need 50 lockers or less, because through the notifications and through the dynamic nature of the lockers, people are picking up quickly within 2 hours, and some of those lockers are being used repeatedly through the day. So that the technology is what gives the functionality that then drives the solution.
Wow, that's super smart, isn't it? Liam, can you talk to me about the fact that you can have all this data, which keeps all your people happy? Are there other things that you want to add to that?
I think, yes, I think there's a key thing that, it's the wave that's coming, and I think it's hitting us very hard now, and that is, carbon neutrality for business. And, this is another, vein of what we do as a business and as a community. So if you take the complete link, so, maybe I look on the other side, the amount of data we collect on waste of things leaving the building. Well, what we actually need to do with the data, we can use it to improve behaviours and activities and actually reduce carbon footprints. And we can't do that unless we're measuring in the first place. So you can't improve without measuring. And that's where the data is important. And I also see that's where, the nature of, being able to improve the last mile and remove, diesel utes off the road and swap them for electric bikes. And, because if you look at the way we're looking at carbon, there's scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Well, we retire all 3 scopes. In fact, we're one of the few ones that does. But scope 3 is all the offsite. All the offsite's included as well. So having the data gives us the ability to actually identify, recognise, offset. And once you're measuring, you can do that, and that's very important. We want to talk about being a genuine carbon neutral, carbon zero, business and country. Then these are the sort of things we actually need to be doing.
Okay, so Dale, this sort of sophistication must be, jewels to your ears. I mean, pearls to the jewels, whatever. It must be great for design.
Absolutely. I mean, look, for us, it's about seamless integration as well. So it's not something I touched on before about friction. We know that user experience comes down to reducing friction and really making things easy to use. If it's fairly seamless and you can get that information, then for me, integrating that is inevitably the smartest way to go. I like the way things are heading now are getting a lot more, I say, integrated and seamless. So I think that's really an important part of it. I mean, I don't know the stats on how many people have smartphones these days, but I guess, you'd expect most people in most professions in business have got access to a smartphone. It's a natural kind of device. And I guess with the, incoming 5G network and how that sort of all becomes more sophisticated and more access to more data, it's really going to give us the opportunity to tailor our design response going forward. The challenge to design and to architects is really how do we predict or kind of look to the future about where that's going and sort of start to inherit some flexibility to adapt to the future trend as well, because one of the things we're seeing is there's not much set and forget anymore. These things need to be adaptable. So that's that's the challenge for the built environment, because the software is far more adaptable. So, building the right space that responds to the brief now and then into the future, and then understanding where things are going in such a fast-paced world is probably one of the challenges that we see.
Yeah, things are moving pretty quickly. Our next question. So are the systems able to maintain the convenience valued by consumers and also address security concerns? Lauren, what do you talk us through this?
Sure. So, look, there was a McKinsey study a few years ago that looked at people's preferences in terms of deliveries, and look, there are many since then. But basically, people prefer that their items be delivered to the home first, secondarily to their place of work. And so that's really what we're solving for. When you look at the solutions, there are sort of on a spectrum. You've got the Australia Post locker or the 7-Eleven locker where the occupant actually has to leave the building or drive to collect their item. So you've got that on one side, and you have these private parcel locker systems on the other side where the building owner or whether that's the body corporate or whether that's whether that's Liam, putting the system on the ground as an occupant's amenity and for the benefit of all. Those are equally solutions, but as you look at people and as we talk to people, they really don't want to go out of their way to get a parcel. So again, this is sort of demographic related. Sort of the younger people, our uni students will say, well, I'm happy to go to my Australia Post lockers because look, they have lots of time on their hands. They're not doing anything. When you get to people like me, I say if it takes me longer than 12 seconds, I'm not going to do it that way. So it really is demographic specific. And an interesting point around this is we've done 4 surveys, and in each survey, 98% of people have said they prefer to pick up from their own location locker than go somewhere. So look, you've got a mix. But in terms of security, we see a lot. And look, I'll give you a couple of examples of why we're getting outreach and why this is really starting to gain momentum. A very significant apartment complex in just outside of Melbourne, inner Melbourne. They had a break-in just before Christmas where 70 parcels were stolen from a parcel room at 4:00 in the morning. So what we call sort of parcel pirates are really operating even at a high level, at a significant level. We also hear a lot from people who have Airbnb. So there's a lot of short stays in residential buildings. the sort of common theme is that as people who are visitors to the building are leaving, they say, "Oh, look, there's a case of wine in the mailroom," and so on. And really, cameras are not solving that. On the commercial side, Liam, you and Dale probably know better. We're not really hearing as much about theft, but we are hearing about loss, where parcels kind of go into the building. Someone says, "Yep, it's been delivered. You got a delivery notice," but it can't be found. And so, look, probably not stolen, but it's just lost, which still creates a liability for somebody.
Right. Thanks, Lauren. What do you say here, Liam? Do parcels get lost a lot?
No, I think in the commercial environment, and it depends on the nature of the asset too. I think I sort of have the benefit of a large sort of team on the ground running the assets. So, and I can give an example. Generally in December, we measure in December. We had 19,000 parcels come through the building, and
wow.
we didn't lose one. So that gives you a concept of how much you like. I say the trucks roll up, and literally there's like the pyramids of geese are tipped out to be delivered during the course of the day. Normally that happens 3 times a day leading up to Christmas, or anytime there's one of those big was it the Black Friday sales or something. Literally you roll in the next day and you've got to take your hiking gear to get over the mountain of parcels. So, but in terms of security and commercial building, that the security systems we have with the cameras and any building that's got decent technology and security generally does have an issue. We can identify. We have facial recognition. We have behaviour recognition. We can pick up things like mobile phone dwelling and stuff. So we can tell if there's any sort of what we describe as antisocial behaviours happening.
However, you've also got the situation where if you've got something that can make sure that doesn't happen, like you were talking about, Lauren, it's also that extra security, which is another layer. So, Dale, does that present other issues for you when you're coming to design, when you're thinking about security and for people and parcels, etc.?
Oh, look, at a physical response, a single point of entry, a single point of delivery is much easier to control. The system that Lauren's been talking about, I guess, gives you the option to have a much higher rate of tracking and delivery, as she's already touched on before. So I think that the physical space is fine. I think my view, and this personally, of course, though, is there's a perception around there's quite a lot of high emotional, I suppose, risk to something being lost or not being delivered on time, or getting lost in the ether somewhere, and then you've invested that time and money and you're expecting it at a certain time, it doesn't turn up. So the security, I guess, around that and being able to track and trace, I think, is really important, and at least knowing that it's accurate. So again, that's more of a software, and that's the real data kind of component to it. So I think the physical response is easier to respond to, and it's probably very much smarter to have it in a single point into a building, really.
Right. Okay. Thanks. I guess this brings us on to the things that are sort of happening from last year and happening now for those of us in Melbourne. But has COVID-19 heightened the urgency around all the issues that we're talking about? Lauren, maybe you've got something to say about this.
Oh, look, I think it depends which state you live in and how long you've covered lockdown. The numbers do vary by state, but just for perspective, I did look up a couple of things for today. So pre-COVID, parcel growth was predicted by many sources to be somewhere within 9 to 12% per year. And then that actually grew 14% from 2017 to 2019. So it was actually bigger than what was projected. But the interesting thing is year over year from last March to this past March, homes grew 69% and people in apartments grew 79%. So that's year over year delivery. So it has been extraordinary. So we do believe, sort of looking at our own data, so we can see our commercial buildings versus our resis versus our student. Sadly, students are really quite low. We do see this giant shift to homes and apartments. But I think it's going to start shifting back to international towers with a vengeance as people start coming back to work. So absolutely, it's affected it.
Yeah, Dale, have you got something to add to this?
Yeah, I think the urgency, I haven't seen as much of an urgency as delivering the system as much as a lot of people taking the opportunity, and this is our clients, I guess, and the landlords in their market, saying this is the time to implement these systems and let's get it embedded now. And then I touched on earlier, it's a bit of a draw back to that tenant amenity, and having access to that, I think, does certainly help. I think the second part around the COVID-19, though, that the bit that we're still reconciling is really around contact tracing, really. And I think there's an interesting kind of component there that it's naturally embedded into, I guess, the systems and software. Also, again, as I touched on before, the single point of access into a building. So it's certainly it's heightened the discussion around all the entry points and touch points in the buildings, and how we can track and trace. So there's definitely a part of that. And then the materiality component too. So, serviceability, the material selections in terms of, their natural, I guess, sort of infection sort of responses and so on, how we can actually deal with that through design. So it's sort of the conversation's been heightened for sure.
Okay. Do you have something to add to this, Liam?
I think just, I think, agreeing with all the other points, but also just adding the physical hygiene sort of factor, that you're reducing a face-to-face contact, and potentially from, when you talk about tracing and how far a courier driver may pass in a day. So if you're able to reduce that, and, you look at some of the implementations across, all the services we faced when the pandemic was in its peak, with all the Perspex screen everywhere you went. I mean, the sale of Perspex must have gone through the roof, I reckon. But this actually adds to that separation of, and we've seen that with a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses won't take visitors to their premises at the moment. So there's a whole, so there is a complete OH&S overlay at a high level, and this actually does help play into, or support that, because you are actually reducing a physical. And now you see this most recent strain that's in Australia, and just it's, how virulent it is. Look what's happened to Melbourne in the space of a week. It's frightening. And so the greater ability we have to isolate these random interactions, and traceability as well, in terms of we know when things came and went, then that's a good thing.
So, Lauren, really, when you look at it, it's the non-contact for the here and now, which is absolutely front and centre, isn't it?
Well, as Liam was talking, I'm thinking about some of our buildings in Collins Street, right? So say you have a cluster of 6 large buildings, and the mail, just the postie, when you think about how the postie delivers to a lot of those buildings, going every day, floor to floor, from this floor to the next floor, every time touching a button, and interacting face to face with people to hand off parcels, that even, technology aside, that goes away, because now the mail goes directly to one location. And if the postie was there and had been infected, that's where the limitation would be, to just that, that area. So that's pretty powerful. Secondly, there is each system is a bit different, but ours has a QR code. So you can actually collect your parcel by just scanning the QR code, no touching the screen. And then the door pops open, and you grab out the parcel and close it with your elbow. So there are sort of layers there of reduced contact, certainly.
That's fantastic. We're actually, can you believe it, finished our discussion. With our time is moving on. And I wanted to get to some other questions as well. I know that we did touch on emissions and traffic congestion. Is there anything more that you wanted to say about that, Lauren?
Look, I think we've kind of woven it in, but basically the one thing we didn't really touch on, we've talked about delivery efficiency and being faster. We've talked about reducing failed deliveries, but one of the other things that I think ties a lot of our discussion together is delivery density. So every delivery that goes to international towers is not a failed delivery to the home. So there's a real argument for saying, as people come back to work, and now we've got thousands of people on our towers, we're actually centralizing the deliveries to the inner urban centers, and then we don't have to drive to 50 homes if we've delivered 50 parcels to 600 Burke. And that's really powerful, and that's a very big part of the conversation here as well.
Okay, so Dale, does that mean that when you're looking to design a building and facilities, amenities, that in the future you won't have to really think about the traffic congestion that might be outside, or how that's going to impact inside? Or am I being a bit broad here?
Oh, look, I mean, maybe blue sky thinking. Would we like to? Would we like to see less congestion on the roads? I think we'd all love that. The urban realm, more of a pedestrian interface. People in all our congested cities, no one wants to see more vehicles, colliding with pedestrians and public transport systems. So a decongestion of our urban realm is obviously a big driver in design. But it's going to take more than what buildings can offer. I think getting to the threshold, to the door, is one part of the problem, and we can then come up with something from there. But there's a greater conversation around streamlining. I agree with Lauren's point. I think the important about how you can create more centralized models. I think that's really good, especially when you bring them back to city centres. But yeah, how does the building respond to that? It's really then getting things off the road. That is the trick. Do we have the magic bullet for that? Probably not just yet, because I think it's so interwoven with transport systems and e-vehicles and everything else that's coming with that.
Right. If we're looking at the way that we're trying to cut down our emissions and people using these sort of situations, Lauren, can you, an audience question here, can the systems be used by other people than couriers? Say, can a wife drop off a lunch to a husband, or these sort of things?
Absolutely. So it's a great question. And again, it does depend on whose system you deploy at a building and where it's located. But things like peer-to-peer deliveries between neighbors, deliveries from the local florist or the local dry cleaner, all of those are facilitated by our software, and other vendors might have some similar things as well. So absolutely. And so if you've dropped off a lunch and your husband says, you didn't drop it off, you can call customer service and they'll confirm that actually your wife did drop it off at 10:18 this morning. So there's lots of things. Tradespeople's keys. So an interesting application. And as people see these systems, they start to think of ways to use them. Building managers are doing things like putting a key in for Otis elevator, and Otis's bill comes back and says, oh, I was on your site for 3 hours. And the building manager can now say, actually, you dropped off the keys an hour after you got here. So there's lots of ways to actually use the data, to Liam's point, to actually, lower the operating costs and facilitate, smoother operations. Airbnb keys, cleaners keys. A lot of people just leave a key with their cleaner. And actually this way, the cleaner can pick it up on Tuesday, go to your apartment, put the key back. So yes, there are a lot of other use cases.
This sounds good. How do you think that it'll work in with your situation, Liam?
I think, very much the ability to, it's like once we start measuring, we can improve. And I think, we see the first opportunity, we see, the benefits of the human experience. But with the measurement, with being able to measure, capture that data, and see those activities, and I hear certain out in the OH&S space, I hear that they're now, there's discussions about the responsibility of courier vehicles from when they leave their depot to arrive to your site, and who carries that responsibility. So, these things begin to, understanding when people left certain locations and delivered things is going to be very critical to, to improving health and safety issues and operational issues, and therefore, and that all plays into a much better environmental footprint. I know from the waste side, we weigh every single bin that comes out of the building. You actually photograph it as well, and the significant change we've been able to make by doing that is purely because we started measuring. You can't do it if you don't measure.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to, as we're in the Q&A section of our session, I just wanted to know, Lauren, if you could just let us understand how you specify a parcel delivery system. What do you need to know? When should you start the planning? Is timing important? It's very important for Dale. So if you would just like to fill us in on this.
Well, maybe Dale, I'll let you start with this one. How are you thinking about it? I'll just fill in the gaps.
Well, absolutely. Okay, so from our perspective, it's obviously, like everything, we'd like a decision on these things early. From, I guess, our clients, and understanding when to implementing early is best, because obviously once you start getting into planning and block planning and trying to figure out spaces and requirements, I guess the ratio and application, we touched on it a bit earlier in discussion around, the, I guess, NLA and building occupancy rates and then applying the right ratio to the amount of space. That's where Lauren and team and I guess companies like Groundfloor will assist in working out the right ratio of amount of lockers you need, and that's going to give you a space outcome. And then obviously allocating the land grab, if you like, as I like to call it, in terms of where these spaces are going to go. Getting that discussion early is really important. So it's really about defining quite early in the brief, like, are we going to have it? Yes. How much space is it going to need? Okay. And then I guess working out, how does it present? That's kind of the easier bit at the end, really. The icing on the cake.
Hey, Lauren.
Yeah, well done. I would just add the flow of parcels through the building. So thinking about where it is relative to parcels and where the parcels come in. And then also, is it a space where your recipients would like to go to do that collection? Is it, next door to the cafe like it is at some of our installs? That I think is really important. And the other thing from a technology standpoint is a place where there's good mobile signal is critical, and also internet. So because the systems, the modern systems, not only work on a touch screen, but do allow collections and operation by mobile. If you're put in a space where you don't have good internet, you can plug it into the wall in a data point, but actually you need the signal for the mobile. So you'd have to have a signal repeater. So we're seeing more and more these mail areas that are put out in broad open spaces, but we're still seeing a lot of buildings. I visited 2 in the last week where they've kind of confined the mail and parcel area, like under the stairs, under the structural area where there's no signal. So it makes it a little bit more challenging.
We do have a question, and I just wanted to ask you, Lauren, from the floor. Somebody's asked, what are the mechanics of the system? You've been talking about needing to have a signal, but how do you actually enter? Is it via a key code or keyboard or an item, that links the item to the locker? Or
sure. So it's all the software handles everything, but to be simple, it's 3 steps. So the courier rocks up to the lockers. Most of our guys have already been pre-registered using their handheld, handheld device or mobile phone. They can go straight to making a delivery. Because the systems are private, there is a database in there of every tenancy and anyone who wants to receive personal parcels. So we do that in different ways through integrating with a building portal or through signups. It matters, right? Because you don't want the people from the street to be using the 600 Burke locker. So it is private. It's basically scan the parcel, select the recipient's name, and select the size of the locker. And then the locker magically opens depending on what's available and which one is meant to be open next. And as soon as the door closes and the courier's done with the session, the SMS is issued to the recipient. Or email. So if people don't want to provide their mobile numbers, they can also provide a work email. And as long as they have a domain that matches one of the tenancies in the building, they can receive a delivery.
Right. Well, Liam, I think that must keep your concierge quite happy, or those that are, on the ground floor dealing with the day-to-day issues. Is that the case?
Well, it's not only the case for them, but just stepping back to something Dale mentioned earlier. I always talk to CEOs on the basis of you employ people generating business revenue and having relationships. And now if you can deal with certain things that are real estate that's not very effective for you, you're paying premium rents to attract that great talent. But so you don't want to be taking up space on, effectively, as I used to say, stationary cupboards and printers. So, there's a number of solutions we've implemented. But what we're trying to do is if we can remove effectively the bottom 10% of a business's operations, and this is one of those solutions, they can actually free up space that they're paying for and effectively seek revenue generating people in space that was previously just drawing up overhead. So it fixes both an operational sense for us, but it's actually good business sense. And particularly a lot of businesses of the scale where they do have their they have their internal mail rooms with a number of people attached to it. So if they can manage around those, they can relieve some overhead for themselves by taking on a proper solution that works for everyone.
Okay, great. I do have a question here. What about the instances where the courier delivering my parcel is not aligned with the building's parcel management system? Is this where the concept fails? Lauren?
So that's actually a great question, because with new installations, it's not about the technology, it's about the change management, particularly in a building where there are existing processes already in place. And so again, this sort of speaks to how your vendor handles that. For us, we take that responsibility. So Australia Post, DHL, Couriers Please, they all know when we're putting new installations on the ground, and push that information down to the depots. We offer training at those buildings, like 600 Burke. You can't really mess up the building, but that's a critical part of our service. And basically what we find is once the system gets up and going, the drivers tell each other about it. It's simple to sign up. If you're a substitute that day, you can sign up and go. And look, it does depend on the building, but by and large, the support is growing. So now we're based in Melbourne, so many of our buildings are here. So our couriers are delivering to many of the buildings in the CBD, and they're geolocated at the side of the building, and off they go. So we do, some of the guys that were the hardest to get over the line when we had the first couple of installs, our first prototype, we call them our poster. They could be our poster people, because they're so happy with it. They've continuously used it. So we don't know of anybody who's actually started it and then said, no, I'm not going to do this anymore, because they're doing 4 to 5 deliveries a minute.
So does that mean that Dale's one of your poster pinups?
Well, I don't know, Dale. Have you used it personally? I'm not sure.
No, but a lot of the assets that we're working on are implementing it. So, yes, but no, we're familiar with this. But I haven't personally, no.
So the concierge at your building has been excellent.
Yeah, but to your point though, every client that we're working with at the moment on a national basis they're asking these questions. They're implementing these systems. They're wanting to know how much space they need, how to deliver it. And they're looking again. I think, like Liam's point earlier, looking at the whole, the cost upstream, downstream issues related to this, so how they can save time, effort, what they're offering to their tenants. So yeah, it's part of a wider and broader conversation around the complete tenant offer. Yeah.
You've just mentioned something that triggered a bell with me. So one of our clients is the largest student accommodation in Australia. So they have 1,600 students when full, of course. They started with us where they said, no, our staff want to make the deliveries. And so they continue to have staff receive parcels from couriers, make the deliveries to the lockers. And we said, look, let's transition you to couriers making direct deliveries into your lockers. And having done that, they've actually saved $100,000 a year in labor time handling parcels. So it's been extraordinary, and we're seeing that in other buildings where we're taking labor out of the process completely. Because look, no one needs to be involved in something that simple. It's the perfect thing to automate. And at the receiving end, there seems to be quite a lot of sort of happiness about tech delivery.
You've been saying that, Liam, that there's lots of happiness from the people, from your people, about deliveries.
Yeah, well, I think it's just an experience. It's an experiencing, and it's very much in their own hands. That's the other thing. People love the ability to have these things managed in their own. It's in their own control. They've made their order. The goods arrive. It's purely a direct relationship with the individual themselves. And in fact, the more you can remove the layers out of that process, the person feels like they have. When an individual has more control over that destiny, it's a much better outcome for them in their terms of their experience. We don't, corporates or operators don't need to be running around interfering with that process. We actually need to be removing ourselves from the process and making it absolutely seamless for them. And honestly, I know when you do order something, I like the thing. Even though you know what you've ordered, there's still nothing quite like going down and picking it up. It's that's a great experience, and as small as it may be.
Especially when you can pick it up from somewhere that's clean and safe, and it's going to be there as well. Yeah. There is a question here, and Lauren, you could perhaps answer this one. Is this system cost efficient for single residences?
Well, that's interesting. So single family dwellings, at the moment, we don't have a solution for that. Our smallest system has 12 doors. In small, medium, and large. So if you're incredibly prolific and have a large family, why I'd say go for your life. Put in a single tower. It would certainly work in your neighborhood. But look, it's pretty cost prohibitive at that price. There are systems involving, but our market is really more sort of the mid to up, up market, apartment market and commercial buildings.
Right. We don't have very much longer to go. And I do have one burning question that I wanted to ask. Looking to the future, can the systems we've been discussing completely do away with the need for couriers to knock on doors, or will there always be some cases where face-to-face contact is necessary? So, Lauren, perhaps you can start us off.
Look, I'll say two things. The number one is if the courier doesn't feel comfortable using it, the courier shouldn't use it. However, if it's supported by management, which it is in almost every case, then there's no issue. Having said that, the retailer is really who drives the need for a live signature. And so if the retailer says, you know, this is a Dell computer, you must have a live signature, then the courier is obligated to do that. So on one side, you've got what they call ATL, authority to leave. You can just leave it in a safe place. At the other end, you have, I'm delivering a computer or a mobile phone where you must have a live signature. Everything else in the middle is eligible for locker delivery. So that's probably 95% of what comes through a building.
Okay, so Dale, how do you see this for the future, and especially from your perspective when we're looking at design?
Well, I'm going to go further abroad and a larger, more speculative. If I'd like to consider that perhaps with the advent of drone technology and perhaps looking where that might end up going, actually completely decongesting the ground floor plane and bringing parcel deliveries in vertically through the building from rooftops, which are highly underutilized in our cities. I suppose that's one option. Now that still brings it to a central location, but it doesn't necessarily need to have not to go against the name of like the business, Lauren, but it doesn't necessarily need a ground floor experience anymore. So it could be more in the heart of the building, which is then perhaps gives us more scope or opportunity. Look, that's a broader idea, but I think conceptually, I love the idea that it could really take back the ground plane to a pedestrian and urban realm experience rather than having to congest our ground floors with, I guess, parcel deliveries. Or in this case, even a central location, but even coming vertically into the building. So that's perhaps one idea I'd like to see or like to speculate on.
And Liam, how do you feel? What do you see in the future?
After Dale's controversial, I was going to say I'd like to see how the drone is actually going to fly into the locker. I'd like to sit back and watch that happen. That'd be a bit of fun. being the owner of a drone myself, so I still think even despite all the let's go back years ago when people told us when we're all going to have devices like we do now that we'd all be working from the beach. Well, guess what? None of us actually are. It was going to be. The fact is, we are still. We're still social beings. We still want to get together. Life is still about experiences. And even if you look to this, the pandemic has been a really interesting thing. The return from the pandemic has actually all been about delivering experiences. So we've done all sorts of experiences that we've teamed up with the City of Sydney on. And so, so I actually look at, it as an experience because the nature of what people are doing, they're doing it's their own personalized, very personalized experience of what they buy being delivered to them, meeting a whole lot of requirements. I think the requiring a signature is going to be gone anyway, because I think your digital signature, which is on your mobile phone, effectively with the right security, I can't see an issue. I certainly know if you go and pick something up at the post office now, you don't have to sign for anything. Even in the old days where you used to have to sign for everything, you don't sign for a thing anymore. So it's really, and even the guys who I had some stuff dropped off during the pandemic at home, and no signatures required. And so I think it's I actually think that's just a barrier that some people haven't, that some organisations will need to get themselves past. But I still think there's a human element of bringing people into the public realm, engaging, having experiences, seeing each other. It's why you think of all the people who still go down the street and get a coffee when they could probably make it at home for 1/4 of the cost. We still go down and do it because it's an interaction, and that really is what the reality of being the social nature of how we operate.
Right. One very, very quick last word. We're down to the last 2 minutes here, Lauren. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Gosh, I think that was a pretty good summary. So it is about sustainability. I guess to bring it back to what the topic is around greening deliveries, and I think it's interesting to see how a single technology can do so many things. bring operational benefits and amenity and help green the environment. So I think that's what excites me about it, and what excites the people that we talk to about these types of solutions.
Okay, well, we're at the end of the session. What can I say? It's been really fantastic. I'd like to thank you, Lauren, Liam, and Dale, for your time and your invaluable insights, and thanks to everyone for your attendance and your questions. Our next session will be Lighting to Make Cities Safer, presented by